so excited?
I'm super excited, especially because I have no idea what we're going to be talking about, but I know that you have a plan. So,
And also, I must say, no plan sometimes is the best plan.
except when it comes to business execution.
That's true. Unless you're like solely so intuitive that you can just like go off of them.
I'm not like that. I think you and I have a friend who does that. He
Who?
doesn't do it, but he could do it. Joe.
Yeah. Yeah, he could.
He's intuitive.
Do you think he is?
Well, I didn't know him before. I mean, I've only known him for like a year or so, but
Yeah.
I get the sense that it's one of those things like you either have it or you don't. Now, I say that, but I hope I can develop my leadership skills and develop my business acumen. But like, I think it's one of those things that like I come to the table with enough that like he's helping me like refine it. But I think with him, he's just a natural.
A natural intuitive person.
Yeah.
I actually agree with you. However, I don't think that he refers to it as intuitiveness.
How come?
I don't know. I don't think that language exists in his vocab.
Hmm. I guess I guess that wouldn't exist in his vocabulary because then that would imply that you can't change your behavior and you can't improve on yourself. And it's almost like an excuse to tell somebody like it's all right, you can't perform, so we're not even going to try.
With using just intuitiveness.
Yeah.
I think everyone has it though. You have to train to be aware of it
Mm.
and like listen to it. And then you have to train yourself to trust it being yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eitan just had an aha moment.
Well, yeah, because I think I think that comes it goes to like mindset, right? So it's like trusting in yourself is like one of the most important. Trusting in yourself and trusting in God are like the most important aspects of mindset.
Yeah, I totally agree. So when you look at like a pyramid of energy or like chakras, have you ever seen like your 7 layers of chakras?
No.
Okay, well, you're like 7 layers of chakras, aka like if you look at a pyramid of energy, some people say you have like a low vibe, like your vibe's not good. That's like vibration, right? They're saying like, oh, like I'm like a happier person basically, and I don't want to like be around you because you're like negative.
Yeah.
That's them being in their like low vibration. Their
Hmm.
low vibe, low vibration, low energy state. Like negative energy is a negative state is like a negative energy place. So anyway, the highest form of energy is love, and right beneath that is authenticity. And so like authenticity, like you can't be authentic unless you're like intuitive essentially, right? So I think like the higher you train your intuition to listen to yourself to be authentic as humanly possible, you then can move into the form of like love full time and be in that energy. And then everything you attract is that, right? Because you attract what you are.
That's very cool.
Isn't that
And
so
and I
cool?
it is cool because when you talk about like authenticity, like that to me is like one of the things that is like one of the most important aspects of my personality. And funny enough, like I wasn't always that way, but I went through a period in my life in my early 20s when being authentic became so much more important than being what I thought people wanted me to be. And it was in that change that like I became super empowered. And then not only that, so it's funny, I was shooting some social media content in Palm Beach earlier this week, like Palm Beach, Worth Avenue, 10-20 million dollar houses, that kind of thing. And I felt so kind of like gross because I felt like a little bit inauthentic doing it, but I know that that's what I had to do to get the views, right? And so, sometimes, so yeah, it's really it's kind of interesting how like, before in my early 20s or before then, it was like being authentic wasn't important to me. It was all about like trying to be the thing that I wanted to be or what I thought that I should be. Now it's, hey, I don't care like what you think about me. I don't care what I just show up as Aton every day. And that's like the high, like what you said, like other than love, like the highest form of energy and vibration.
Yeah. And then everything you get back is that. And then your life is so much easier, right? So I think
Yeah.
that's somehow how you've attracted Joe, who you're referring to as your coach, who we could absolutely talk about. I'll ask him for permission later. He is like truly authentic. So, in other words, like you mentioned, he's intuitive, he's extremely authentic. Ironically enough, so today I wanted to have you on because I want to talk about how you've used your coaching, like you getting coached, and how you've used that to better your business,
Yeah.
yourself, and your business. And Joe is your coach, right? And Joe used to be my coach in like a previous life. And he helped me in my business like tremendously. And before him, I had previous coaches and they weren't authentic to me. They weren't a match for me. And my business was a reflection of that.
Mm.
I performed to the extent and height of the coach that I had. And then when I got Joe, when I got a coach that actually matched my like energy and my vibe and like all the things that we talked about before, my business literally skyrocketed and there was no going back. It happened way too fast, actually.
Wow.
um, and so I think I love that he's your coach now. And yeah, I wanted to see how what your life looked like and your business looked like before him, and then less about him, right? But more just about like having a coach, period. Did you have a coach previously to him? And like what's that journey? How'd you find him? I want to talk about all of that.
Absolutely. Have we started? Like, are we like,
Yeah, this is
o-
officially, yeah.
okay, cool. And so, yeah, I can talk about Joe. I've had a lot of different coaches, not just in real estate, but in life in general. And so Joe is the kind of guy that I'm attracted to for this phase of my business, and I think that like future phases as well. But I've had experience with a lot of other people, and so I guess to your question about like what it's like having a mentor, somebody who I can rely upon to consistently bounce things off of, to give me advice and to help me look at where my priorities lie. I mean that's there's it's invaluable, right? And when I look at the value that I get, it's I feel like I'm getting like a steal, like for what I pay, like it's a steal. But so what do I get from that? It's being an entrepreneur is a very lonely place.
Mhm.
It's a very lonely place because you are surrounded by people who all have some sort of vested interest in affecting you one way or another to benefit them.
Mhm.
So whether it's like I have overseas employees who in their culture, and Joe and I have talked about this, in their culture, they never like to give their boss bad news. And so it's hard to really kind of drill down and get to the point with them where they're feeling comfortable to tell me like how real things are. And then you have employees who, yeah, they're loyal, but to a point. And so by having a coach, hopefully the idea is that they're there to they've already blazed the trail, and even if it's not necessarily industry specific. So I've worked with people who have been in other industries, but there's a certain aspect, a certain goal that you're trying to achieve, whether it's personal happiness, personal development, business leadership. And so when you have the coach, or even physical stuff like a coach on a team or a personal trainer. So they've already blazed that path. So they already know what kind of obstacles you're gonna hit before you even hit them, and if they get to know you well enough, they know how you're gonna handle them, and so then they help you not have to reinvent the wheel, and they help me to not hit those obstacles as hard
Yeah.
and deal with it sooner so they don't become a problem like cancer in a business.
Yeah, I love that. So, yeah, for some people, they don't see the value in getting a coach and paying for the expense of a coach because a coach can be expensive, right? And so, what are the benefits? And when you look at having a coach not as an expense, but as an asset, really, like it's a
Oh yeah.
line item on your balance sheet that absolutely should not come off under any circumstance,
Yeah.
even when your revenue is low, right? Because you need that coach and the guidance to bring you back on track right away and help you get the revenue back, not the opposite. So I rather cut marketing before I cut a coach. So, did you have a mentor or did you have a one-on-one coach prior to your current coach?
For business.
Yeah. or personal.
Yeah, so there are a bunch of people who have been really impactful in my life, um, that both paid and unpaid. Now, first off, I can tell you I've been in a handful of masterminds, but those are really like groups where everybody's kind of coming together, and the community sort of feeds itself and helps develop the other members, and so like that's great, but to have like a one-on-one thing. So I've had some mentors. So I'll tell you my very first one would be my grandfather, and he's since passed away. But he was a successful business person, and in real estate. He had a different niche than what we're in. We're buying investment properties. He built homes and then managed commercial properties. But he was by far my biggest mentor, and I would also say my biggest cheerleader as well. And he his cheerleading made more of an impact on me than everybody else who would ever say, "Oh, Eitan, you got potential," or "Eitan, you should, you're great at this, or you're great at that," because he had already been there, and he had already experienced the hardship. So he had already built up credibility with me, so that when
Mm,
he would give me praise, or when he would give me advice, like it carried more weight than anything else.
that's amazing. So, less about like Joe specifically, but just in the realm of like who's an entrepreneur, if they're on the verge of like getting a coach versus not, why they should and how impactful it's been for you, because like ideally it's like the self-development journey essentially, whether the coach is about like business or a personal life coach, like, or a therapist that's helped you, like literally who cares, whoever has impacted you, like you mentioned your grandfather,
Yeah.
um is like really the goal. So, yeah, let's assume that we can't use anything that we just used, which is totally
That's
fine,
fine.
just in case we didn't hear you. So, we work together in real estate right now in Florida
Mhm.
market, and we have a mutual friend who is your coach now.
Yes.
And he used to be my coach, and he helped me and my business tremendously. And now I do coaching, and I'm super passionate about it. And yeah, I wanted to hear like from your perspective being an entrepreneur, how coaching has impacted you personally as a leader in your business. Like what have you seen in a positive or negative, if any at all? I guess when you hire a bad coach, that's negative. Not every coach is created the same.
Yeah.
But your experience around that. You had mentioned you had mentioned previously you started off with your grandfather being a mentor. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so my grandfather, very successful business person in his own right, and from a young age, he would always try and teach me business lessons, and sometimes it had to do with leadership, or sometimes it had to do with trust with your employees, with all sorts of different like lessons that I've taken with me, right? So one thing is never personally guarantee a mortgage, and so
Mm.
that's one thing that like I rarely if ever do. Not because I don't like to default on mortgages, but because it helps change the conversation. But just all sorts of like lessons, things that like I would have had to have learned the hard way, and the coach has already blazed that trail. And so Joe has been there, and he's been doing this, and he's been successful, and he works with a very successful operator in the same industry that I'm in. And so the idea being that by having a coach, you can get some really honest, sometimes too honest, feedback and lessons, so that I don't have so if he starts to see me making a mistake that maybe I don't see, he's going to bring that to my attention right away. And you and I have had some of those conversations about some of the marketing and stuff. Same thing with personnel. Yesterday or 2 days ago, he and I were on a call, and he said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Let me stop you right there." And so, like, he basically like slammed the brakes on the conversation, and he said, "The thing that you just mentioned, Aton, that does not sound right at all." And then it took me a few seconds, but I'm thinking, okay, well, yeah, it doesn't sound right. And I'm glad that you're calling me out, because it's so easy as an entrepreneur to kind of make excuses and to paint whatever picture sort of fits the narrative, good or bad. I mean, there are times when I'll paint a negative picture in my head of about how the business is going. And he says, "Well, Eitan, let's look at this objectively." Right. And so, bless you. And so
Thank you.
having somebody who's like totally objective, and they're looking at my business through the same lens that they look through their own business. I mean, I don't know who would pass up on an opportunity like that, especially if you have somebody who's really talented and also really good with communication.
Well, I like that you are defining a coach as looking at the business objectively. I mean, obvious, that's obvious when you say it out loud, but entrepreneurs obviously are so subjective and in our own heads and constantly creating like these narratives that sometimes can be like detrimental to revenue coming in, right? Because our
Yes.
thoughts create our physical reality because
Yep.
it's energy, going back to energy. Yeah, I love that you just defined a coach as objectively looking and helping you steer. And it sounds like he course corrected you. So I have a question. Can we know like what he was course correcting you about?
Okay. So
Okay, sounds like you're open.
okay, so it had to do with employees, and I said that this is some of the behavior that I'm witnessing with some of the employees, and this is yeah, and then I started to almost like make an excuse for it and say, but well, it's okay. And he said, wait, let's stop it right there, Eitan. He's like, this has got to stop, and he said, this is something that you as a leader need to like take control over because it could become cancer that spreads throughout
Uh,
your organization. And so the value in just like that 5 minute sort of vignette, that part of the conversation, because I meet with him an hour a week, just one on one, and so just that 5 minutes right there, I mean, could have saved me like 6 months of engaging in like horrible leadership in a certain aspect, and then having that tank my business or set me
yeah.
back quite a bit. And so that's the amazing part about working with him or with any coach is that they're able to sort of see down the road. I'll give you I'll give you another example. So I have another mentor who he's an incredible guy, an incredible entrepreneur, and he's been extremely successful, especially from a very young age. And I went and I met with him last year when I was going through a transition period between an old business with a business partner and my current business. And I had some thoughts about what I wanted to do and should I do. I wrote down like six different things, and I said I'm not really sure like how to sort through all these because like some of them are good ideas, some of them could make me a lot of money, but I have to learn something, I have to study, I have to practice to get
Mm.
good at it. And he said to me when I presented everything to him, he said, Eitan, how much money do you have? And how much basically how much runway do you have to be able to explore all these different options? And I said, let's save that in like another year and a half of runway. And he said, okay, what can you do of all of those things? What is the thing that you can do to make as much money and find as much success as easily and as quickly as you possibly can so that you don't extend beyond that runway. So you don't find yourself in a year and a half saying, oh, geez, I wasn't successful because I started in a brand new industry and I could have been successful if I had another 6 months, but I fell short. And so he said, you don't want to find yourself in that position. Do what you think you can make the most amount of money doing as quickly as possible. He said, what is that? And I said, well, wholesaling real estate. That's what I love doing. And that's what I've been doing. And he said, then do that. And that right there was literally life changing.
How
He
so?
changed my life. He changed my life in that moment. Well, I'll tell you
Well, I'll tell you. Please do.
what was life changing about it is that I was there at a crossroads and I could have done a whole bunch of different things because I got in my own head
Yeah.
and I could have explored different types of businesses. But by getting that very clear direction and the validation from somebody who has his opinion holds so much weight because of what he's been through and the mistakes that he's made, but in spite of those mistakes, he's become incredibly successful. And so I could have made some really bad decisions if I didn't seek his counsel. And what that would have happened if you could sort of like play that tape to the end is me running out of money, not being able to support my family, being totally miserable. And if this is a podcast where a lot of entrepreneurs are listening to it, the same things that drive us to be successful also hurt us when we're not enjoying that success. And I know that I have depression when things aren't going well. Like if my phone's not ringing with new deals and the phone stays quiet for too long, I get depressed. So if I had gone down that road, I mean, who knows like the depths of despair that I would have found myself in if I said, how could I have made the wrong decision? And so by him helping me make the right decision, I was able to do exactly what he said, and I made as much money as I possibly could in the shortest period of time, which allowed me to now be a better father, a better husband, a better, and I have employees, so I'm a better, boss,
Leader.
leader.
Yeah.
And so that advice right there was life changing. And to him, it was probably like totally obvious, intuitive, like what you were saying earlier about Joe. And so I give him a tremendous amount of credit and for that.
So a coach like really can shortcut your success, your road to success, and then can also like exit. So not only can a coach shortcut your way to success, however you define that as, whatever you define that as, right? Everybody's different,
Mhm.
but it also can like explode your business exponentially further beyond what you could even see, because a good coach can see the potential in you before you see the potential in you.
Yes.
So it sounds like when you were seeking advice from your mentor, you were in wholesaling real estate prior with your business partner, right? And it sounds like, were you, once you got out of that business relationship and you guys broke up, whatever happened there, were you almost like fearful of getting back into the same business by yourself? Like, why didn't you just jump back in? Why were you hesitant there?
That's a Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think it's very easy with hindsight to look back and say, oh, if you end the relationship, on a Friday, then why don't you just start up the new thing on Monday and do the exact same thing? But I almost think it's like it's like a divorce, like in a marriage, right? Or if you're change can be hard. And so when you make like big changes in your life, whether it's, with a spouse, like divorce in a spouse, or in a business relationship, if you change something so drastically that's been so consistent in your life for so long, then there are all these sort of things that kind of creep in and say, well, is this even really what I want to be doing?
Mhm.
And then the question too is, was I unhappy in the previous thing, or did the whole thing fall apart before because of the relationship, or because of the industry, or is it because of the market that we were in? And so there are all these things kind of swirling around. And if it isn't clear why, then it raises a lot of questions. So, for instance, I have another really good friend who just got divorced, and his ex-wife had some very serious personal health problems that were causing a lot of problems in the marriage. And
Mhm.
it was like very self-destructive behavior. Okay, and that's all I'll really say. But for him, it seems to be a lot easier to jump back into the dating scene or into being interested in dating again, versus somebody who where it's less clear, like where the fault lay in a marriage, right? And
Mhm.
so I know some people who got divorced and like, I'm never marrying again. I can't go through that again. But with him, because it was very clear like what the problem was, why the marriage
Mhm.
ended, he's willing to do it again. For me, ending the business relationship gave me an opportunity not just to ponder if this was the right industry to be in, if this is the right market to be in, why was I not happy in the other relationship, or what is it that I was looking for by ending it? And so that took me some time to sort of figure out. But meanwhile, the meter's running, and I had to figure out what I wanted to do. So that's where the issue came in. And I think that if it was a lot clearer, I would have been able to start it sooner.
Yeah, there's such like emotional wear and tear that happens with business breakups that no one really like talks about. And it
Yeah.
happens out of nowhere. Like, you have no idea how drastically different your life's going to change when you like decide to break up with your business partner. At least I
Hmm.
didn't. But you truly like you become so reliant and codependent on this other person that when they're gone, it's like, even if you were upholding 99% of the business on your own and they were just there for moral support, they meant so much more to you emotionally, less about the business though. And then when that breakup happens, you have to go through all of those emotions of separating just as if it was a personal divorce, like you're mentioning. And that's
Yeah.
when really people can just absolutely go off the rails or not in
Yeah.
your sense. And I don't disagree with your mentor saying just get back on the simplest way possible, because your brain goes into like fear mode, right? no matter what the case is, like your brain is in absolute fear, flight, freeze mode, right? Like that's just the
Yeah.
stages that you go through when something like that happens. And so the easiest thing to do is what you know so well, even if it's not what you're meant to do for the rest of your life. It's like just do it for a year, literally, until you can mentally get out of what you're in and then make your life altering changes if that's what you choose to do.
You're absolutely right. And I think making big changes in your life is really only appropriate if you have some other aspect of stability in your life. So you want to make sure that you're stable in everything that you possibly can before you start making big changes. So, the last thing you want to do is like quit your job and divorce your wife and then have a kid with a side relationship. You don't want to make too many changes at once because you have to give your attention to the thing and you need the support of the people around you to be able to help you get through that big transition. And so you're right. I mean, so I think that like if I wanted to make a change, if I wanted to go into some other industry, which I don't, I love what I do, I'm passionate about what I do, and it took starting this again by myself and working with Joe and building a whole team out for me to realize this is what I love doing. I am in my absolute purpose every day, but I also had a stability at home
Yeah.
and I had all those things. But if I were to make a change, I wouldn't do it unless I had plenty of runway to make a mistake and then go back to what it is that I'm doing.
Curious, what were your other six things on your list?
I think I can pull it up. And I wrote it down. So in preparation for meeting with my mentor that day in June of last year, I wrote all these things down and all my thoughts and my notes, and I really meditated on it for a long time. So one of the things was I had, with that other business partner, bought a hotel,
Hmm.
and so we bought that hotel together. And so then the question was, do I spend time pursuing more hotels or more commercial properties? And then another one was doing some technology related businesses that I had thought of for some things that I wanted to work on. I also had a lot of thoughts surrounding AI because 2023 was like when AI really sort of like became a huge thing, and I was thinking, okay, well, what can I do to adapt AI into different industries and utilize that for various things? And I just had some just sort of ideas of things that I could do, and because that's who I am. I'm an entrepreneur. I like to come up with
Yeah.
ideas and what can I do? And he's like, look, let me stop you there. All those things sound great. I'm not going to address each one of those, but if you have a year and a half, do what you know and then you can explore those.
Yeah, I love that because when you are going through like the grieving stages of the separation, whether it's a divorce or a business divorce, you still have to go through those grieving process, the grieving stages. And like we said before, doing what you already know, almost subconsciously, you could get through your day without too much like brain power because you already know what you need to do on a day to day basis. It's not something
Yeah.
brand new. I love that. So that only happened a year ago? I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So,
Or
yeah, that only
a
happened a
year and
year
a couple
ago.
months, over a year ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was March of 2023 that we basically shut the business down, and we spent the last year sort of unwinding everything, and that's all done now. But yeah, it was March of 2023, and then it took me like 3 months before I really had the opportunity to meet with the mentor and met with him, spent a whole day with him, and he was extremely generous with his time. Met with me, and it was a life-changing day. Like I said, the decisions that came out of that day were life-changing, both in being able to enrich my life, but also preventing like me falling down like a really slippery slope of like depression and despair and
Yeah.
failure. And so he could see it objectively.
You can't like afford more rejection or failure when you're already in that negative state, really,
Yeah.
especially for an entrepreneur. My God, our mindset is like so powerful and so important as an
Yes.
entrepreneur. Everybody's is, but especially for an entrepreneur, because it's literally how we like generate income and lead other people is through our mindset and our energy.
Yeah. One other thing that I had to add too is, my wife was pregnant with our second child, and he was born at the end of July. So I met
Oh
met
my
with- met up with
gosh.
the mentor, and all this stuff was happening with the backdrop being like we're going to have another kid, and I'm very fortunate my wife doesn't have to work because I've been able to provide that life that she doesn't have to do that. but there's a lot of responsibility when you're bringing another kid into the world, and you also want to be present too. And I didn't want to be an unhappy dad welcoming my son into the world and focusing so much on the business or on creating some new business
Mm,
that I wasn't going to be present for him. So I've been not just present, but I've also been successful to a degree.
that's amazing. I love that. So you're very happy with that decision, obviously. I'm sure the rest of your family is
Very.
too.
Yes.
So when you were in business prior with the partner, did you guys have a one-on-one coach like you do now? Or is this your first one-on-one coach experience?
So the closest thing that we had is we had a business coach for a while, Gary Harper. I know he works with a lot of people in the real estate wholesale industry, fix and flip business. He's a fantastic guy, and he's really amazing. His specialty is in my niche. And so we would do weekly meetings with his staff, and we would do quarterly meetings with him and his wife Susan, and they would really help uncover issues in the business, and they were extremely helpful. But with Joe, he's the first guy that I'm really meeting with one on one to discuss business stuff.
Got it. Okay, so it's like truly different. I know who you're referring to. And I've been through a lot of group coaching sessions where we meet weekly. And so there's that, which is great, but there's also sometimes 25 people on the call, sometimes 55 people or 100 plus people on the call. And the difference between the group coaching and the one-on-one private setting for me personally is completely different. I almost get zero benefit from the group coaching as I do the one-on-one coaching. The one-on-one coaching is just so impactful for me. So I feel like
Yeah.
that's a little bit what you had versus what you're getting now. I
Yeah.
understand it wasn't group, but it was generalized. It wasn't one-on-one.
Yeah. And so that's absolutely the case. And I think one of the main benefits that nobody really talks about the individual coaching is the fact that you can't hide. Like
And
you and I are one on one right now. If you ask me a question that I don't really feel comfortable answering, I can't point to the person next to me and say, you answer it. I got to come clean. And
yeah.
so that means that I have to come here prepared to bear everything, and the good and the bad. And that's, I think, that a huge difference is that you can't hide because there's a limited amount of time when you're with a in a group coaching session.
So being able to get the benefit of one-on-one private coaching, how have you shown up differently? How has it affected and benefited you personally?
Don't mistake my hesitation answering this question to be like I have to really think hard about how it's helped me, but like it has totally shaped the way that I've done this, how I've restarted this business. It's totally shaped everything about it, because in my hiring decisions, in my buying decisions, in my marketing decisions, in my allocation of capital decisions, everything gets run by Joe. Every big thing gets run by Joe. And then he's basically there to say, okay, I like it, I don't like it, or tell me more, and then let's decide. And so it's a sounding board, but it's totally different than having like a business partner, because with a business partner, there's always,
The
you know,
emotional aspect.
yeah, the emotional aspect, the ego, and all that stuff that shows up. But when you have the coach, it's like, hey, I'm paying him for a service. I don't have to take any of his advice. I could totally say forget it and waste the hour. But there's a certain level of God, what you have to like just skin in the game. So I have skin in the game by virtue of the fact that I'm paying for this hour to work on me, and it would be stupid for me to just lie and not show up for it.
So, what do you think now that you've had like insight on this one-on-one coaching?
Mhm.
What do you think your biggest gap is now from where you are and where you want to go and what you want to work on in between to get you?
So today, what it is Joe said the only thing that you're in control of, and actually here, let me pull this up. What did he say? Okay, I'm literally reading this from my coaching notes from the other day. The one thing is my execution of my control over my time.
Mm.
That's the one thing, is the how I'm executing in my business to have maximum control over my time.
So, how are you executing on that practice? Like, what does that mean in your physical reality that you're going to do differently?
Great question. So, well, yeah, no, because no, and I say that too because I mean it's so great to like have a coaching session. You feel good, rah rah, everything's wonderful. You're like, wow, that was so impactful, and then you hang up, and then you go back to whatever it was that you're doing. But like one of the other things with Joe is that we make sure that, okay, we said all these things, you've complimented me on this, you've criticized me on that, but what is it that I'm going to do when we hang up the call? What are like my three things that I'm going to work on over the next week so that I can show up here the next week and say, this is what I've achieved. And so how am I going to control how am I going to execute on controlling my time? Well, I already do time blocking, but it's so easy to like let things sort of creep into the time blocks. But every decision that I make, from like picking up the phone or making a phone call, it's all like I'm turning it into a game almost. So how can I fence off my time and really keep out the distractions? And then also everything that I'm doing, can I have somebody else do that at least 70% as well as I can? Can I
Yeah.
really delegate
And
that task?
the trust and delegation. Yeah. And
Hmm.
that's really hard for an entrepreneur, especially in the beginning stages, because, well, for one, for me, this was hard anyway. I'll take responsibility for that. It was really hard for me when I had to make my first hire, and I had to because I literally got so busy that I was like breaking down in the middle of the day, crying because there was no possible way I would physically be able to get every single thing done. And in real estate, there's deadlines. Like if you don't do it, that's it. It's gone. The deal's done. You either take it when you can or you don't get it. So
Yeah.
it's not like a random to-do list like drop off your dry cleaning. Who cares? I'll just go buy a new dress on the way there, like it's actually like do or die deadline things. I had to make my first hire, and it was hard for me to even wrap my head around giving up control, because who in the world would ever do anything as good as I could? Trusting someone else to do it, trusting myself to hire the right person, to train the right person. And then there's the money factor. I don't want to give up $500 for a transaction to hire a transaction coordinator. Like
Yeah.
I could just do that myself. And it was a really big mindset shift for me when I hired my first TC to give up the $500 or whatever. At the time, it was like $300 for the TC work. And now that I'm used to having a TC, I'm like, I don't even know how to log into Dot Loop anymore, nor do I want to. Because why would I spend my time doing paperwork when that's not an income producing activity? And then, like, all the things shifted. And once I got good at delegating, I like barely did. I only did things that were income producing and I really, really liked and enjoyed. But it was a huge mindset shift and it took me years to get there. And like I wish I did it sooner, but so talk to me about that, like your hesitation on the leveraging out to someone else and the trusting and the money, like what is truly getting in the way there?
So I'll address that, but I'll just tell you this morning it was crazy. So I'm part of Joe's Ramp Academy group as well. I we had, what was it? Dave Olds came on a couple
Yeah.
weeks ago, and so that was really cool. And so I started following him on social media, and he posted something that I saw just this morning that said the gap. And I think he has a TC company. So just to your point, so he said the gap between where you are now and where you want to be in your goals is the amount that you're willing to delegate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
Because
you and I
we
talked
all
about
know
this
that. I was say we all know that, but it's like sometimes you have to be smacked across the face
12 times in a
before.
row.
So go ahead.
No, yeah, literally like 12 times in a row before it sinks in. Like
Hmm.
I was coached one-on-one privately about getting a TC for minimum 3 months before I finally did it. And it took me like standing in my dining room hysterically crying for the day, like figuring out how I was going to get through my day. And I was
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, what could I possibly offload? And it's like, of course, the paperwork's the easiest part to offload, especially for a salesperson. Why in the world would I ever do paperwork as a salesperson?
Yeah. But a lot of people, they confuse activity with results. And so if you spend all day doing paperwork and then you go home and you've made not a single phone call to generate revenue, and you go home and you say, gosh, I'm exhausted. I did paperwork all day. You feel like you've accomplished something, but what have you really accomplished? Nothing. And
Yeah,
so
mistake
that's
busyness for, yeah,
mhm.
you're right. You feel
Yeah.
busy, but none of it's income producing activities. And when you're an entrepreneur or relying on commission as a salesperson, et cetera, income producing activities is literally the only thing that matters.
And that's what leads to burnout. And that's why so many entrepreneurs fail and why so many entrepreneurs are miserable.
Yeah, I totally agree. So
Yeah.
you and I have talked about this privately off this podcast, we'll call it, as well, for delegation. And there's sometimes this hesitation, and I'm curious how you're looking at it now with sort of moving, right? Because you have all of these deals in your pipeline. And I think the biggest hurdle for you is like moving those deals through the pipeline to get them active for sale so you could sell them and make revenue, right? And
Yeah.
while they're income producing activities, they're not really, right? Because they're just like the management of the deal at that point. You already got it done. You already got the deal in the pipeline. And then how do you hand that off as quick as possible for someone else to push through for you?
Yeah, yeah, these are great points I'm glad we get to discuss. So you're absolutely right. And then I've also had problems too where, okay, I've been in this business for long enough, and I've had enough coaches, and I've had enough, I've heard enough people say, focus on the revenue generating activities. And then you know what happens? I'm only focusing on acquisitions, and I'm not focusing on dispositions or fulfillment, because I'm saying I need to be on the phone talking with sellers. And if I'm not doing that, then I'm not being productive. And so just the opposite kind of occurs, where I just focus on acquisitions, and I don't focus on the actual thing that's going to get me paid. So it's kind of a balance, right?
Mm.
So how am I viewing it now, right? So I think the first thing is to have enough of a cash reserve. That's like the number one thing, because as entrepreneurs, we're looking at things. We're looking at especially early in the business. We have the accounting method of just like, is there cash in the bank or is there not?
Yeah.
And so it's hard to budget when you're not making consistent income, and you have huge chunks coming in here and there. So having enough reserve to be able to support an employee for a given period of time, let's say 6 months. So you know that if that employee doesn't do anything for 6 months, the only thing you'll be out is money, and you've already budgeted so that it's not cutting into anything else. So I think that's the very first thing, and I agree with you. Administrative tasks are like the number one thing to start delegating before anything else, because that's the stuff that can. It's the best way to delegate is to have stuff that's like repeatable processes, and filling out paperwork, talking to clients, managing existing clients, not new relationships, but existing clients, and doing just like filling out contracts and stuff like that. That's stuff that's like repeatable. You can have processes around that, and that's the easiest to delegate. So that's where I would start, and that's where I've started. My very first hires were always admin people.
Admin, yeah. They're like the backbone of this type of
Oh
business
yeah.
because salespeople will come and go all day, right? They're literally
Yes.
meant to turn over in a good way.
Yeah.
And your admin are the admin that they're literally your backbone no matter who comes and goes as a salesperson. All your systems and processes for your clientele forward facing is the same.
Yes.
So that's amazing. So are you going to hire a dispo person? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Well, I'd like to have people in every seat, but you're
Your next hire.
my next hire. So that's actually on the agenda for next week. So I just said in the last thing about how it's important to have enough cash reserves to be able to
Mm.
make these hires without feeling like it's going to be a huge drain on you. So while we're sitting here, I'm very fortunate that there's a closing taking place that's by far the biggest closing that I've had in my entire life.
Good,
And
we've been waiting for this one.
it's life changing, and so the closing is happening right now, and the wire should hit my account before the end of the day, and it's Friday. And so I'm
Aw,
super super psyched about that. And so
that's amazing. Congratulations.
thank you. And so two things about that, right? So the first thing is all that money that I'm making, and it's a really, really, really big six-figure sum, and that I've already allocated to investment in the business. So whether it's additional marketing or additional personnel, that money is going to be allocated for that. And so I've told Joe, I said next week on our call on Wednesday, I want to discuss how we can increase my leverage, how I can leverage my time better and bring on some hires. Maybe bring on some additional people who maybe I didn't feel quite ready yet, but who, Joe, you think are going to make a huge difference in moving the needle in my business. I'll take a chance now because I have that longer runway to be able to support that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, if you have systemic problems in your business, money is not going to solve them.
Hmm.
Throwing money is going to be gasoline on the fire that's going to make it worse. So if you're a poor manager of people, or if you if you have poor marketing, or if you have a poor sales process or if you have really bad stuff, bad processes that are not dialed in, putting more money into that is not going to make it better. It's only going to make it worse. And then you'll find yourself out of money and no further along than you thought you were
Yep.
before. So that's what I'm really cognizant of with having seen that before. I want Joe and I are going to work very closely together to decide, okay, who we're going to hire, how we're going to hire them, what their specific role is going to be when they're onboarded. And then Joe always asks me this question. He says, so Eitan, what's it? How are you going to know if that person is successful at their role?
Hmm.
He always asks that. Like, how are you going to know if X, Y, and Z is going to be successful? Because before you do anything, you want to figure out what's the goal. Like, what are you working towards? You're not just doing something just to do something. I'm sure, Kate, before starting this podcast, you said, okay, well, how am I going to know if this podcast is going to be successful? How like, what is my goal here? What am I trying to achieve? And figuring that out before undertaking anything is super important, not just doing something just to do something.
Right.
So and that's another thing too, is that visionaries and business owners, entrepreneurs hate holding people accountable. That's the thing that we hate doing the most, is holding people accountable. And so
Why do you
there
think that
can't be
is?
anything that we're all people. And so
Yeah.
we're salespeople, we're people. We like to have good times, we like to build relationships, um we don't like to come down hard or hold people accountable, and we also are very forgiving, and we believe that everybody has the best of intentions, and that they're all going to work just as hard as we will.
Yeah.
So so if you're in my situation and you're going to come into a kind of a big pile of money from a particular deal, and you're not going to hold people accountable because you're just not predisposed to doing that, and you don't have an idea of what's going to make this role successful, that is a recipe for total failure, total disaster. And if this call is about hiring coaches, and there's one thing I want to say, it's that's a huge problem. If you don't have a coach, if you don't have somebody who's there to guide you through something which looks on the surface as being like a huge gift, it's actually, this could turn into like the worst possible thing for me and for my business. So that's why I have Joe guiding me on this, because I don't want to make the wrong decisions, and I certainly don't want to take too much risk with personnel and then affect their lives. If they're not the right person, I don't
Yeah.
want to have to terminate them, and then I've disrupted their life and my business, and wasted money. That's why you have the coach.
Again, it's like that whole emotional roller coaster of the wrong hire, especially if
Hmm.
you get a negative person in and they're a bad apple for the rest of the team. Like it could just do months of damage for your culture. When hiring, like that's really what you're hiring for, is to fit your culture, right? And if the person fits your culture and the energy and your belief systems and values, the results will come. Now you have to provide
Yes.
the KPIs and the measurements, obviously, to make sure that that person's staying on track and they understand where they're going metric wise. But I think that's one of the biggest things that I've taken as well. Like if I get along with this person and I trust them, like one of my employees, like she's amazing and I can trust her doing anything and she has my passwords for everything. With that, the results just come. Like it's so easy once you hire the right person, culturally
Yeah.
speaking.
Because I feel like a bad culture fit is going to be so much worse than hiring somebody with the wrong type of experience.
Mhm.
To me, the only experience, unless you're hiring a doctor, you don't want to hire a heart surgeon to do eye surgery, right? But that's why I love young people who are in their 20s or in their early 30s, who don't necessarily have a whole lot of attachments, right? So they can really devote themselves to being productive in the business, and who are just enthusiastic, optimistic, sometimes a little overly optimistic and a little overly confident, but they're not
Only
afraid to
because they
get
haven't
burned.
had those life experiences to really just shape the shit out of them.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. Exactly. So that's why I love working with people like that and having them as part of my team, because it's always going to be a great culture fit.
Yeah, I love that. And so we were introduced, obviously, and started working together. And immediately I was like, this guy's like no other real estate investor that I've worked with. because you're so humble and you really don't have an ego at all, and you're so coachable and like thrilled to learn all the things all the time, and it's just such an enjoyable experience. And I remember one of our first conversations you and I had, you were like, well, it's really slow right now, but I know that I've made it through being an entrepreneur for the last 10 years, and I don't have a doubt that I'll make it through this slow period. And I just remember
I remember
thinking, like,
that.
that's such an amazing mindset, right? Like, you have such faith in yourself and self belief that it didn't matter the slow time existed, literally weren't even phased by it. You were phased enough to acknowledge it, but you were not phased that it was going to last at all. And I really enjoyed that about you. So thanks.
You're actually kind of getting me emotional just saying those things because I appreciate that tremendously, and I think it goes back to authenticity, which is that's exactly how I felt and at the time, and that's exactly how I feel now. And so that's what I shared with you because that's what was going on, and I wanted to paint an accurate picture of what was happening. So I think people appreciate like rapport building, and not to kind of sidetrack here, but I think rapport building, and I do this all the time on the phone in sales, is like just being authentic with people and allowing them to be authentic with you.
Yeah.
And there's no better way to develop rapport than with that. And so the people, like I was on the phone with a guy today. I was on the phone with a guy today who's like a business development manager for a big company,
Hmm.
and he must have said, "Hey, brother, hey, like brother and buddy," and like 16 times, and I'm like, dude, you've spoken to me like twice. Like, don't say that. Like, you come off as so inauthentic, and so
Yeah.
like I don't like that, and so um,
You don't like it because you can feel it being inauthentic.
yeah, just
Yeah.
call me by my name or whatever. Use it once or twice. Like, don't have to like repeat it. Don't act like you're my best friend if you only met me twice on the phone.
Yeah. I think you said earlier you just show up and build rapport with people and are authentic about it. And I think that only happens when you detach from the outcome. Like, you're
Yes.
not going in to get the sale. Like, of course, like, your intention is to always just get the sale as like a salesperson. That's what you're doing, right? But if it's not a good fit, then it's just not a good fit. And if you show up authentically, that energy goes out there and you receive that back, whether it's a good fit or not. And that every transaction is like so much easier.
Couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't agree with you more.
And you can't possibly show up authentic if you are attached to the outcome because you're constantly pushing an agenda,
Hmm.
which shows up inauthentic, period. Like, you literally can't do both.
And that also has to do with the sales process that we use that's very similar to Joe's. Like traditional sales, like when you think of traditional sales, it's like you go into a car dealership and they're beating you over the head to try and buy this car. Well, let me think about it. Well, why do you have to think about it? Well, I got to discuss with my wife. Well, who wears the pants in the family, you or your wife? That whole like traditional sales thing,
Like, it's
right?
1990.
Yeah, like 1950.
I feel like it still existed in the 90s, though.
Probably, although I didn't buy a car in the 90s. But so yeah, and so like now, yeah, like my biggest KPI in my business right now is number of two-way conversations. How many two-way conversations can I have on a weekly basis, which is authentic conversations where we're building rapport, where I'm uncovering what the needs are, and again, being detached from the outcome. So and Joe teaches, and I've experienced that these deals close themselves if you're talking to enough people and you're having the right kind of and you're having the right kind of conversations, asking the right impact questions, then the deals close themselves,
Yeah,
and so
it's
you don't
easy.
have to worry about closing. Yeah, it's super easy.
And then that's when you show up like with your faith and self belief and self worth of you being able to get the next deal. And how ironic I bring that up. And you're sitting with me at the time of one of your biggest closings ever.
Yeah,
Like, that's
yeah.
crazy.
Which that money will hit my account, and you know what, that I was talking to someone about this last night, that like, yeah, it's a huge achievement, and like I will take a second, because you have to take a second to like congratulate yourself and realize like how far you've come,
Hmm.
and but also when that money hits my bank account, it's not going to change anything. Like, I'm not going to go out and buy, a Lamborghini or a new house for myself, or, whatever. I might be well advised to buy some jewelry for my wife, but that's a separate story. But I but what I view that is like I just have like a toolbox that was just dropped off at my house that's full of shiny new tools from Home Depot or Lowe's, and this money is that tool that's going to allow me to build a whole bunch more things in my business, be a better steward of my employees. It'll allow me to continue my relationship with Joe, and like my real strategic relationships. It will allow me to employ more people and help feed families. I mean,
It's
that's where the
huge.
real it's huge. It's so much deeper than look. And granted, I have all these Ferrari books right behind me because I love Ferraris. But
But you're
you
not
get so much
buying one
more.
today.
Yeah, but I'm not buying one today. But it brings me so much more fulfillment to like be a part of people's lives who I help, whether they're employees, where it's always a two-way relationship, right? So with the employees where they give me value in exchange for the money that I pay them, and my customers whose homes I buy, where I give them money and they give me problems, but somehow the money offsets it. And
Yeah.
so those things are so much more impactful than seeing numbers on a computer screen is like, what am I going to buy with that?
And I think, like, you're so right. Money doesn't or shouldn't change you. It only amplifies who you truly are. I think like Gary Vee says that, or somebody, I forget, but Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah.
But money doesn't do anything, right, for you. It doesn't fulfill you. Like, do you feel more fulfilled once this six-figure check dumps into your bank account today? Like, no, you're literally still the
No.
same person. So if you were miserable before, you're still going to be miserable, just with a few dollars in your pocket. So I think
And don't
like
get me wrong, I'd much rather have more dollars in my pocket than fewer dollars. But
I'm with you.
but yes.
But yeah, you've shown up in such an authentic and good, genuine person and leader and employer for other people, and so this just amplifies that, which is amazing.
Yeah, and I think too that like having that attitude is also what helps with keeping good talent, right? Because if I made this all about me, like, hey, look what I did, and like look how great I am, and look how like being flashy and all that is it, then that turns people off, and then you start getting people like employees who are resentful because hey, I'm not sharing in the upside in the same way,
Yeah.
and that's corrosive. But one other thing about the money piece is that like that's the exact same tactic that I take with sellers who I'm talking to when I'm looking to buy their house. So somebody calls in and they say, "Hey, my my dad passed away and the house is in foreclosure and my siblings and I want to sell the house." Okay, well, why would you want to sell the house? And amateur salespeople wouldn't ask that question. They'd say, "Well, duh, he wants money." Okay,
Hmm.
but yeah, everybody wants money, but money like these little like green pieces of paper mean absolutely nothing.
Hmm.
They provide absolutely no value. The value is in what you can buy with it. And so,
That's
what
right.
is the
In
what are
exchange
the
for
money
something. Yeah.
exactly? And so, what is that money gonna give you? And I say, okay, well, there's a lot of there's gonna be a little bit of complication, and there's always some family discord that's part of my deals. And so, like, okay, so with all the crap that you're gonna have to go through with this, is it even worth it to sell the house? And they're like, well, yeah, because I would hate for my dad's house to, which is really my dad's legacy, to be the end of it be at a foreclosure auction. Okay, well, that's interesting. So what happens if it does get foreclosed on? Well, I would be really upset. How come? Well,
Ooh, you're three deep already in
how
question
come?
asking, being curious. Yeah.
Yeah, because, and I'm genuinely curious too, because like it's never about the money. I mean, money's important, but it's about what the money does for them. So,
Yep.
well, because my dad worked hard for this, and like his legacy for it to just like end at the courthouse steps at an auction, that's just I can't let that happen. That would hurt me too much. And besides which, I think that there's some equity in the property, and my siblings and I could use that money. Look, we know it's not going to, and they always say, we know it's not going to be life-changing money, but we can do something. We can give it to our kids, or we can, we can treat ourselves with that, or we can just pay off some bills. So now what I've learned with that person is that what he really cares about is his dad's legacy, and that also shows a core value alignment with me, because I would
Hmm.
care about my parents' legacy, and this person doesn't want to feel like their parents' hard work is going to waste, and I'm not a wasteful person. And so here we can connect on that. And but also money is important too. Like they would like to buy something, but it sets the anchor with, hey, we can help preserve your dad's legacy, and there will be some money. I don't know how much money. It could be a lot, it could be a little, and also my definition of a lot and your definition of a lot could be two different things.
Hmm.
But it's the same sort of thing. So like the money hitting my account from this huge deal isn't about the number, it's about what it's going to allow me to do, which is impact more people and change lives. And that's exactly how I view money when I'm giving it to a seller. It's, I'm giving you money, but how is it going to impact your life, and how is it going to change your life? And if the change that it's going to create in your life, and if the impact that it's going to create in your life is going to be worth the effort of engaging in this transaction, then the deal closes itself.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It took me a really long time to understand this concept of my current coach. She taught me that money is nothing more than energy in the exchange of something. And your story that you just told is such a good definition of that in story form, really. So money literally does nothing and is nothing. It just is, right? And it's
Yeah,
simply the exchange of what you're referring to. In your instance in real estate, it's the exchange of selling their house to you quickly, right? So time.
yeah,
And it means
yeah,
to them legacy.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, legacy. Like they don't want to see it be just sold off at an auction, like a piece of cattle, or cattle, or yeah, at an auction, like some commodity. This isn't a commodity. This is their dad's house. This represents their lifelong hard work that they saved for, that they toiled over to get this house, and then now for it to be discarded, like a piece of trash, is just terrible. So, people do care. Everybody has some sort of a conscience, and in this particular role play example, that's what this person cares about.
Right. Yeah, so you're very good. You're a steward of money in a good way for them as well, for the seller.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, Aton. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
This was fun.
Yeah. Very,
Authentically
very fun.
speaking about real estate and connecting with sellers, you mentioned one of your biggest KPIs is two-way conversations. And I think that's like what people miss the most in their business when they're first starting off measuring what they KPI, key performance indicator to measure.
Hmm.
Most people just measure leads, right? If my phone's not ringing, I'm not going to do a sale. And you could have your phone ring 100 times. And if you're not authentically connecting with people two-way, right? Meaning you're
Hmm.
talking, they're talking. And it doesn't need to be on the phone. It could be text message, Facebook Messenger, email exchanges, right? That's really the thing that matters. You could have 105 leads come in, but if you only get on the phone with two, well, then you really only had two decent conversations, and whatever your conversion rate is from there on out is a completely different story as well. So I love that you're measuring two-way conversations. How has that changed the impact of your business, like bottom line revenue?
Huge. Yeah, I think in my last business, we were measuring gross leads, qualified leads, contracts. We even measured dials if we were
Mm.
doing outbound dialing. But there's
All
a
lead
difference between,
indicators.
exactly.
Yeah.
But so you can measure a dial, but you could have like 100 dials and then like nobody's picking up the phone. But if you're having quality conversations, that is an actual measure of like rapport building, because it's impossible to have a long conversation with somebody and not build rapport. I
Yeah.
mean, you have to be like a psychopath. And so like my goal is to have these two-way conversations that are quality, not to like just drone on for like 3 hours with somebody, but to have meaningful conversation with an outcome, with everybody understands what the outcome of that call is going to be. And by the end, we're going to discuss next steps, and we know what that's going to be. But that is the most impactful thing that I can do with my time. And so that's why I have a lead manager, follow-up specialist here in my office, because their job is to basically make all those calls to get the people on the phone so that and do follow-ups so that they can tee them up for good conversations with me, so that as the chief salesman
Closer.
in the
Yeah.
well, we don't close, but yeah, but
Yeah.
as a chief sales guy, where the result of my converse where the he's setting appointments with me, and then I'm getting contracts signed, but only as a byproduct of having a certain number of two-way conversations.
So two-way conversations, the KPI prior to that is leads in, right? And that's
Yeah,
your lead indicator for your two-way conversations. The two-way conversations then leads to how many appointments you're getting, which then leads to how many closings you're getting.
correct,
Yeah. Yeah, I
correct.
think it's such a big then you understand like when you're measuring all four of those main KPIs weekly, you can identify like where what lever you need to pull, so to speak, to increase your output, right? So if you want more closings, then you need to increase your leads, but really you need to make sure if you increase your leads and you're still having the same amount of two-way conversations, well then maybe the amount of leads that you added weren't the right leads for you. And we've actually talked about buying the wrong lead set as well
Yes, yes, we have.
for your ideal avatar client.
Correct. Correct. And so we work very hard to get the phone to ring as much as possible. One of the worst things that you can do as an entrepreneur is to run your business through feel, because I think that entrepreneurs really overestimate their ability to run things just by, I mean, like they say, like the seat of your pants, by feel. Like my gut tells me X, my gut tells me Y. Our gut is great to get us to where we are now, but it's not going to take us to where we want to go. And so by having the KPIs and by having like KPIs that like really mean something rather than like the phone rang 100 times this week. By having meaningful KPIs, we're able to validate our feelings or dis invalidate our feelings. So if I
Yeah.
say, man, I had a really awful week, I didn't get any contracts, but then I look back at my KPIs and I see that I did 120% of my goal for two-way conversations. Well, maybe the reason why I didn't get a contract is because I there was a hurricane last week, you know,
Two.
two
Within
hurricanes. And
within
so
2 weeks. Yeah.
yeah, and so then like should I be really beating myself up over something that I wasn't in control over? So if I'm in control over the conversations, and I also study my sales process, and I maintain control over the sales process, then the outcome, like I said, is a byproduct, unless some external factor like a hurricane
Right.
impacts us.
And that doesn't mean that just means you're prolonging your outcome, right? So it's not that you're not going to get those contracts that you worked on and building rapport this week because there was a
Hmm.
natural disaster, a hurricane for the second time in 2 weeks. It's really if as long as you're doing those income producing activities, those results are probably going to show up a week later, right? You'll probably see double the amount of contracts once this hurricane's cleaned up. So that's the point of like being consistent, right? Like even though there's a hurricane, you're still going to do your activity because that's what you have control over.
Exactly. And I like what you said too about that, like the results show up like a week later because it's a lagging indicator. You know,
Hmm.
it's kind of like people who take antidepressants. So you feel awful, you start taking antidepressants, and then all of a sudden, like your life feels better, and it's like you don't really know why, because like the act of taking that pill every morning, you don't really connect that with like, oh, my life's getting better. You think, oh wow, everything else in my life is going great. So and then you go home, and then the next morning you're like, I don't need to take this stupid pill. And so then they stop taking antidepressants, and then all of a sudden their life falls apart. So what I caution people is when you're looking at lagging indicators. Okay, so if I'm making a lot of phone calls this week, and like what you said, next week I'll see the results for that because I'm only prolonging because of this hurricane. Well, next week, if I don't maintain that same pace, and the following week, I'm going to have poor results.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say, well, what happened? What happened? And so it's that, and then you create that porpoising effect where you have a lot of activity, no results, and then the next week you have a lot of results, no activity, and it just that's and then what you start doing is then you start making changes in your business that don't need to be made because you're being reactive to a
Yeah.
problem that may not be there.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I love that. You mentioned something else I wanted to touch on too, even though we're so over time. So I guess we could always do a second one. Something about two-way conversation.
It's a lagging indicator, or how it's really it's authentic and it's easy to have two-way conversations. Or is it the sales process? You unplugged.
Is that better?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I don't remember. But I'm sure we can circle back and do this again.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Yeah, so I'll wrap it up because I literally can't remember what I was gonna say. Sorry. I think we exhausted it though. Like I love measuring activity because you then can like almost predict your results. You can have that like predictable outcome as opposed to the entrepreneur, like the inconsistency is your worst enemy, especially when you have overhead and salaries to pay for, et cetera. Like that doesn't go away. You don't get an employee one week and not have to pay them the next. So you have to you have to be disciplined enough and do the consistent output to receive that consistent input.
Just and I'll add to that too, just like virtual assistants, like just because they're halfway across the world doesn't make them expendable. I'll just say that too.
Ooh, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, you said that you have to make sure that you're maintaining enough activity to produce enough results to be able to afford your payroll. But I think there's like a perception too that like, people who are working for us overseas, whether they're making cold calls or handling admin work or doing stuff that like that they're expendable because they're virtual assistants. Like it's almost like they don't even exist. But like they're people
Ah,
too, and they have families, and so I just want to put that out there too, that like they're just as important as the people who work in our offices.
that's true. There are some people that could essentially take advantage of their time. And they're so nice and they don't want to tell you no, they've already been working for 12 hours or whatever. They're just there to get the job done for you, right? So yeah, like being cognizant and aware for them to say like, "Hey, you can tell me if you're done for the day." Like I respect that.
Yeah, yeah.
I remembered what I was going to bring up the other day or earlier. So last week we identified how many active listings you needed to have with a 60-day on market cycle in order to hit your closing goal for the week.
Yeah.
And we identified that you actually needed to, let's just say, double your lead count in order to get you to your active listing goal for the week, to get to your active listing goal for your closings for the week. And you had mentioned that someone, I think, I forget exactly, remind me, somebody offered you a lead source that didn't fit your avatar. And if you took that, what would that mean for retraining your salespeople to be able to build rapport for that type of avatar? So that goes back to the conversation that we had prior. It's important that you're not just haphazardly adding leads, you're adding the right leads because it doesn't matter how many times your phone rings. You have to still know how to build rapport with who your avatar is.
1000%. And it's also important to for your sales process because you can't have two like totally separate types of two totally different avatars and then have the same sales process. And if
Yeah.
you don't have the same sales process, then A, you can't measure your activity against your results. Then also you're just winging it every time and you have no ability to improve on yourself.
And if your salespeople are speaking to two different avatars, how hard, like their problems that they're calling you for are so drastically different in this realm of what we're talking about, selling real estate, right? For different problems, they'll have no idea how to help solve their problems with
Mhm.
you. And that's the power of focusing on one thing, which you're very good at. You have one really good avatar and you just need to add different ways to get leads for that one avatar, not add a completely different lead source providing you a different lead avatar.
Exactly. And so just like how we discussed about how many deals I need to have a certain number of closings, which it's all reverse engineering our KPIs, especially with my long cash conversion cycle. But Joe and I also looked at, okay, well, what's my potential audience? And we actually got numbers that were hard numbers of who every possible person is who I could be marketing to that fits my avatar for my ideal seller, and it was so huge that if I was ever worried about competition or other people in that niche, we kind of like laughed at the end. He's like, all you really need are, let's say you want to do 120 deals in a year or something like that, or you want to make X amount of money.
Yeah.
He's like, that represents like, like 1/10 of 1% of the possible people that you could be coming in contact with. And so he said, you really shouldn't be crossing paths with anybody else. And so you shouldn't be worried about your competition. Just there is no competition. It's a blue ocean.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's such a powerful exercise because it really expands your mind on the opportunity.
Yeah, it does. And then it also allows you to focus more on yourself and what you're in control over and stop like watching other people, which is very easy to do with social media these days.
That darn social media. Hey, Eitan, speaking of social media, like how do people find you?
Well, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. Instagram, I don't even really, I got to be posting more. And like I said, I just started doing that more. But Aton Fishbein. If you search my name, I'll come up on social media, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, and you can go to my website, www.restassuredhomebuyers.com, and contact me there. But just send me a DM or something on social media, and I'll get back to you in like 24 hours.
So you're based out of Florida. Where else do you do deals right now?
But right now, I'm only buying in Florida, but I buy in all 67 counties. And we primarily work with families who have inherited properties and where there's like title issues or other complications that prevent them from doing a traditional sale.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Now that we got that out of the way, thanks so much.
absolutely. And then my realtor extraordinaire, and it's then your job to then sell the damn things
Yeah.
once we clean up all the mess, then you get to sell them and put happy new families into these houses so that we can complete the whole circle of impact on the community.
I love it. You know how I found you? I text Ron, Joe's assistant,
Hmm.
who used to work for me.
Okay.
Joe and I like have gone back and forth with employing Ron. Like if Joe's slow, I employ Ron. If I'm slow, Joe employs Ron. Like literally we just go back and forth for the last literally 5 years.
Has anybody ever asked Ron who he would rather work for?
I think both for sure. And I was like, Ron, who do we know that's in Florida? Because I had just gotten my license here. As you know, I'm originally from New
Hmm.
Jersey. And he was like, well, Joe coaches this one guy that I really like, Eitan. And I was like, hello. And then he introed us and I called you and you were at a wedding or something or
I was
a
at a birthday party
reunion.
with my with, no, I was at a birthday party with my daughter. She's 4, but yeah, I was at like a trampoline park or something.
Yeah. And then the rest is history. Here we are.
Yeah. So let me interview you for a second. How come you moved down to Florida? What was that all about?
Well, I grew up in New Jersey and got my real estate license when I was 24. I'm 34 now. And just grew my business there, just started to grow my business. And my town is so small. I graduated public school with 48 kids.
Mm,
And so, if you can imagine doing something like real estate, it caught on quickly. So, I hired a coach and I went from like 20 units a year I was selling to 200 within 3 years. And I didn't spend any money on marketing. 67% of my business was referral based. And then out of that 67%, there was like three different buckets that made up the referrals. It was like agent to agent referral, it was past clients, and then Sphere. And yeah, I grew systematically those lead generation buckets. And
very cool. So
then
so so why
during
Florida?
so then once I got to like 200 units a year, I wasn't in production anymore. I was just managing the team. And so during COVID, I moved down here because everything was completely shut there. And my team was always
Yeah.
virtual. We never even had an office. So I just started spending more time down here. And now, like in the real estate investing world, a lot of the masterminds are down here. And, why wouldn't you want to be in Florida versus New Jersey? So here we are.
I agree. That's really cool. And so another question I have for you is, so you say that 67% of your business is referral based. And one of the things that I've always struggled with is I'll talk to mentors, coaches, and they say, well, how do what's one of your, number one leads? It's not my number one lead source, but one of my top lead sources is referrals. And so how do you scale that? Well, I can't. And that's what I always say. I can't scale the referral lead source. How do you scale your referral lead source? How do you get it to be that big of a percentage of your business and then grow it even more?
You know what? Someone asked me about this week as well, another real estate investor. They're going to hire a BDC, a business development agent, to build their referral network. And they asked me the same thing. And maybe I could do like a whole podcast on this, but essentially it was very easy. So I'm like a really big in person person. So, networking events, masterminds, I've always been a part of. And so it was easy to scale my relationship in between those masterminds. So, for example, I would set automatic emails to go out or tasks for myself twice before the mastermind, once during and twice after. So I would gain mind share to those agents, right? And they wouldn't know that it was an automatic email because I would only write like two sentences. Like, hey, I'm so
Mm.
excited for the mastermind coming up in Austin in August. Can't wait to see you there. And then like the week of, I would send another one like, hey, really, really excited to see you in Austin. Let's connect if you have time. I would never like commit to anything because, there's thousands of people that'll be there. But again, I really wasn't looking to make meeting times with them. I was only looking to gain mind share with them. And then during that time, I would have an email go out. And then after, I would send out my notes from the conference in case anybody wanted to read them. And then I would send out another email saying, hey, I hope you had a good time. Sorry, I didn't get to see you. So that's just one example where I was gaining mind share. I think I named 5 touches there, 5 touches. Plus, if I saw them at the mastermind, that was just a whole conference. That was just a whole other level, right? So I would gain 5 to 6 touches, mind share, just in 1 month. And then I would times that by 3 or 4 over the course of the year, and I would get referrals all day. That's just
That's
one category.
amazing.
Yeah. So just what worked, and then how do you put a system behind that so it works for you moving forward so you can expand it?
What you just shared is like the total opposite of what I would have thought.
Really?
Yeah, and that's amazing.
Thank you.
So it's
Yeah,
like
because it's like I
it's like a
can't
less is more.
always do less. It's like I can't triple my energy going out, right? I can't possibly like meet 3 times or 10 times the amount of people to get more results. Like I'm only one person and there's literally only 24 hours in a day and 365 days in a year. So
Yeah,
how can I gain mind share otherwise? And it was things like that. And then, there was some other things along with it, but it's the social media staying present on there because you're gaining mind share that way. Yeah, so it was just putting systematic approaches in place to expand what was already working.
very cool.
Maybe I
That's
should
really
share more
awesome.
about that one day.
N-
Not here,
I
but
don't think you should because I think too many people would benefit.
I think that's good.
I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's like the easiest way to grow, right? And then you don't have to worry about marketing dollars. I literally never spent a dollar for a lead ever. And then I
So
got
your
into real
returns are
estate
infinite.
investing. Yeah. I got into real estate investing and everybody, people's budgets in real estate investing is like 30, 40, $70,000 a month on marketing. And I'm like, you guys are doing too much. Way too much.
Well, stick to what you're doing and definitely don't cross over to the dark side of investing so that we don't compete because you'll always win if your cost per acquisition is that low.
Yeah. Thank you. One day we'll work on building it out for you.
Please, please,
Let me know when you're
I'll
ready.
take all the help I can get.